Welcome to Your Future Starts Now, the go-to podcast for extraordinary women who are ready to step into their next chapter with authentic confidence. I'm your host, Gia Lsits, empowerment coach, motivational speaker, children's book author, and girl mom. Whether you're a corporate powerhouse or an entrepreneur, this show is designed for you. Your Future Starts Now is more than just a podcast. It's a movement towards rewriting the rules of success for high-achieving women. Are you ready to get unstuck and step into your next chapter? If so, you're exactly where you need to be. Your future starts now. Welcome to Your Future Starts Now. I'm your host, Gia Lsits. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Sheila Buswell. Sheila is the CEO and co-founder of Buswell Biomedical, a veteran of the U.S. Army and the author of Is This Seat for Me? Overcoming Imposter Syndrome in Everyday Life and Business. In her book, Sheila shares her personal experiences with imposter syndrome, as well as the stories of a diverse group of accomplished individuals who struggled with self-doubt but found ways to overcome it. She hopes to help others who feel limited by their beliefs experience more freedom and realize they are enough. Sheila, so happy to have you join us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gia. Glad to be here.
Let's talk about, you have an incredible background. Let's talk a little bit about, just to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to the work that you're doing today.
So I had a scholarship to the University of Utah in 1995, right? But I lost it. And so I joined the Army in 1997. I joined the Army in 1997, and in 1998, I deployed to Bosnia, where I was injured in an accident that led to a medical discharge that I got in 2001. Wow. And then I completed my education, obtaining an MS in engineering. But like 20 years after my injury in 2018, my mom fell and broke her hip, and she rehabbed there. And at first, I started a business because of this product I invented. But the main reason I invented it was because I was sitting watching my mom. I'm not a caregiver, right? But I'm a problem solver, and I sat watching my mom get her dignity eroded, and because of her lack of independence. Anytime you want to conduct the activities of daily living, and this is today, True. As well as it was, in 1998 in Bosnia, you got to be accompanied by a healthcare worker. So I started my business, Buswell Biomedical, around developing the upward mobility, to use artificial intelligence to make it so you can conduct these activities of daily living independently. While healthcare workers are safer and they know where you're at all times. Mm-hmm. But when I started this business, it uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and business. Starting a business required business acumen that I didn't have. So I was asking questions to further my knowledge, and I'm pitching my business various ways, and I'm pathologized with imposter syndrome. And so I'm like, first of all, a visceral reaction of, oh, I don't have that. And then what is that? And you know what I mean? It's not something I personally believe you might experience, or I think everybody experiences themselves, but to be pathologized with it's just weird. It's just weird to have in that situation being if you're not taking a test or whatever, and I think it's called different things if it's different people, right? So, imposter syndrome is what it's prescribed to a lot of people, but it's self-doubt to a lot of other people. And it's said as such. And it's frustrating, the different names that exist. Yeah. And how they're prescribed. But I, at that moment, didn't know what it was. I started doing a deep dive, and I started talking to my friends. Just, I think Peter Smith is in the book, and he has a chapter, but he just had the yoga mat next to me. And there's a bunch of people that I just knew. It was nobody talked about having this almost crippling, and you talk is my time is now or start now, and that whole. But then at the same time, everybody enters into a business and they think, oh, I'm the because of my this. They make reasons why they succeed instead that are external, right? I had a good workplace, I had a good boss, I had a good, but environment but it's not like you're saying, oh, okay, I deserve to be where I'm at. And so that's, I think, where a lot of self-doubt comes from, but I don't, yeah. So I started the business, and then I learned about imposter syndrome. And after I learned about imposter syndrome and I talked to a bunch of people, I started writing the book because I was really passionate about it. And I thought the best way to write the book is to present, it happens to everybody. And I'm an engineer at heart, provide solutions, right? For personal solutions, 5 of them, and 2 cultural solutions. So.
Love that. And I have to say, I absolutely adore the title of your book, because this seat for me, I think it's just so apropos, especially for this audience of high achieving women. So that's amazing. And congratulations on publishing it. I mean, I know it's a labor of love and quite an accomplishment. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. So first of all, it's a very slow process.
Yeah.
And that was the part, that was, thank you.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I want to talk a little bit more about what inspired you to write the book, but it sounds like it started with kind of getting curious about what is this imposter syndrome and recognizing that it's so prevalent.
Those are 2 different things. Like, I didn't know what it was because it was called some imposter syndrome. Definitely I'd heard of self-doubt.
Yeah.
But so I think and then it was like a conversation of like, oh, other people, everybody has it. But in this culture that's fake it till you make it kind of thing, where it's like almost this idea of being vulnerable. I think one of your previous guests talked about the power of vulnerability. And I think that that's important because it is like, um, it, it's, it's, it's a difficult thing to talk about where you feel like you don't fit in, right? Like, but everybody has that feeling, maybe about different things, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there is that basic human need of belonging. So when we don't feel like we fit in somewhere or we belong, right, that gives us a discomfort, which is very natural. And so, but I think you're right. I think everybody experiences imposter syndrome. I think we call it different things. I think it can wax and wane over time. Depending on where you are in your life and what you're experiencing in the moment. And also another important variable is how willing you are to talk about it. Not just externally, but are you able to admit it to yourself when you're experiencing it, right? Or do you just push through and say, nope, I have to just keep going and I'm fine and everything's fine, right? Or do you pause and say, wow, I am really doubting myself right now? And then are you able to externalize it, right? So I think there's different layers to it too.
I think, Gia, you're 100% correct. And I think even in myself, like, I think I know about imposter syndrome, right? I'm an expert in it now, or whatever that means. But like, just recently, I was like doing my pitch, and my story as a generator fell on my foot. I was a generator mechanic in Bosnia.
Oh, wow.
But when people hear medical discharge, most people think, I don't know, you took a bullet for freedom in, a war. And I mean, so it got weird. It's weird how I like in imposter syndrome or like self-doubt to be like a monster under your bed. Like all of a sudden it was whispering in my ear, oh, you don't, you got injured this way, but a medical discharge means that way. You weren't really in, it's not a combat zone. So like, and you got out. So you can make it about anything. And I didn't even notice it coming. Like, I didn't notice that was my issue with it. I just knew I didn't like it. So it wasn't until, and I think it's one of your previous guests also talking about sitting with stuff and just absorbing it. And it was like, I would never, it's not like I want somebody else to be more hurt. Right. Like what if you didn't get and I don't want people to be sent into battle, right? Like, but people who signed up in 1984 had the same threat of being in harm's way as somebody who signed up in 2004. So, or 2014 or what, you know what I mean? Like, it's very complex, but it's until you sit with it and you're like, oh, this is identifying it and then figuring out, okay, sitting with it, the identity, and being like, okay, why do I feel this way? And
yeah. And recognizing it for what it is and getting curious with it, I think is super important. So you talk a lot about imposter syndrome and then, how that creeps up in particular during major life transition. So I would love to know your take on that. Why is it more common that we experience imposter syndrome when we're going through changes in life?
Well, I think our brain is meant to keep us safe, right? But if we're not going to be in our house the entire time. You're more safe probably, but that's not how you fill your potential. But I think you're stepping outside your comfort zone in changes in life. Right. And when you look to the left and right of you, if you don't look like the people who've traditionally held those roles, or you're like, I shouldn't be doing this, I'm midlife, like if you're 45, I'm too old, that monster that slides out and just talks in your ear, you don't know what it's saying, but like a lot of people, I think, feel that, oh, okay, I am scared of doing this because, and they don't realize the negative self-talk that your brain does. Mm-hmm. And like, I think your thoughts kind of lead you in a direction. And like, that's, I think you're more vulnerable and your self-talk, and you don't look like people next to you in those major life changes. So
yeah, it's a great point.
Diabolical combinations.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great point. And I think recognizing that inner critic is a critical piece as well in terms of what is it saying. And we don't even recognize it sometimes. But when you say it out loud, you realize I would never say that to somebody else. Right?
Yeah.
I would never tell someone else, you're too old, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, whatever the voice in our head is telling us, you would never say that to someone else. So I think really like listening to that inner voice is important as well, like you said.
It's so hard to do. It's easy to say, but it's like you don't even recognize sometimes because it's your own inner voice, your own inner critic. Yeah. It speaks in a very seductive voice.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So when we think about those insecurities that we all have, right? Men, women, everybody has them. How do we overcome them from your perspective?
So the personal solutions that I highlight in my book, and I truly believe all of these, but I think that I've used the first one the most, and that's remembering your past achievements. Right. And I've used that in every area of my life. Like I ran a marathon, but I didn't start out doing a marathon. The Army makes you run 2 miles. So I was like, if I can do 2 miles, I can do 3 miles, like I worked up to it. And I think that works in I deserve to be where I'm at because I have a master's in engineering. I spent time as a generator mechanic, like you build yourself up and you give yourself a pep talk. Yeah. And I think remembering you're like remembering we were talking before about being Sisyphus, right? If remembering to turn around and see where you came from and see how the view has changed is really important.
Yeah, I think we often forget, especially for our audience of high achieving women, we forget about those accomplishments because we are often so focused on the task at hand and achieving that next goal, right? And it's all about how do I get that next goal, whether it's title, buy that house, get the car, right? Whatever that is, that once we get there, we achieve finish a project, we move on to the next thing. And then we forget about all the work we did leading up to that point. And so it is really critical to sort of reflect back on your repertoire and like, wow, look at all the things I've accomplished. And not just professionally. I think oftentimes we think our worth is rooted in the work that we do. And, we were very focused on all the things we've done professionally, but also personally, right? The things we do in our personal lives with whether it's personal relationships, community service, religious work, whatever it is for you. I think it is important to take stock of all of it.
Well, like one of your previous guests, I think she was Jamie Higgins. Mm-hmm. But she was talking about how like your identity and how sometimes you need that outside perspective. Like sure. I think in her story, she was talking about how like she knew intellectually that she was in a toxic environment, but it wasn't until she was in the school line that she was like, oh, we're like, oh. So I think that you need that outside perspective. And then to the next thing that there's 5, right? If one is remembering your past experiences, the next one is not to compare yourself to others. But I used to use that as a way to motivate myself. But I think sometimes to compare myself to others, but I think realizing you compare yourself now with like there's social media and you're comparing your reality to a highlight reel. And that kind of plays into the other. Like you want that outside perspective, but that's not what you should base all your opinions on, right? Like you gotta not compare your situation with their known situation. And it's harder to do, and there's harder to contrast if it's somebody who's drinking the Kool-Aid. The third thing is just give yourself grace. And that's so hard to do. And that evolves too over time and in different situations. Like at first it was, okay, I'm not going to be a foot model, right? Or like I'm 5'7" and probably not going to pay for the WNBA. And I'm just going to accept that and, whatever. Go where I shine or, move in that direction. But it got to be even, okay, high achieving is, but sometimes it's hard to do, to give yourself grace. I had pneumonia last year that I couldn't get rid of, but I was moving and I had a business. So, but there was stuff that needed to get done. There was piles that needed to be put away. But you know what? I needed to get better, but it took me months to learn that. And sometimes giving myself grace that like, okay, it's okay that I don't feel good. Just do what I can. And then that's it. Sometimes all the plates fall to the floor that you have spinning. And that's just something you have to move on from.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is just be mindful of your thinking. Like you can't always think positive because those people suck to be around, right? Like, but just be mindful of it and know that if you're giving yourself negative self-talk, if all you hear is this echoing seductive voice that says where you don't belong and that's all you listen to, it's easy for your brain to get steered in that direction. Just be mindful of it. I think that's the best way to change. And then the last thing I got from my grandma was to keep things in perspective, to be like, will this matter in a year? And for most things it won't, right? Like I get vehemently angry in the moment when I'm cut off, but in a couple breaths, it doesn't matter. So
yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. And
well,
I think
all those things
kind
of work together. Like you can't, it's hard to isolate them because I think most people have tactics that they use, but I have found that those are the heavy hitters that, I have used and my friends have used.
Yeah, it's important. I think you're right. And how they work together can be, I'm sure, incredibly powerful. So talk to us a little bit about the way you see imposter syndrome manifest itself in different people that you work with, or the different types of people you work with.
So in the book, there's a barrage of different stories, right? But one way that it came up that I didn't see, or like even when I've worked with people who are overworkers, and Mary talks about that in her story, and she's like, she talks for a myriad of reasons why that would be, but she doesn't think she can get done in the 8 hours what other people do, because she compares herself. So she ends up doing more, and she works late, and it's 10 hours, and then she's on her way home, and that was continually happening. And then she's in her 50s, and that's a pattern in her life. It's hard to own. And then like Ingrid talks about being an expert and feeling the need to know everything. It's tiring and it's a lot. Nobody knows everything, not even Google, right? So there's this, where does that come from? And it comes from not feeling like you're quote unquote enough. And it's just, so you overcompensate for that a little bit. So I think like it manifests in different ways. And then like when I was telling this isn't in the book, but when I was telling my story about like the generator falling on my foot and all that, like it manifested in weird ways. I talk fast. One way I was like in front of a camera and my hand just went up, right? Like there was a physiological reaction that I didn't understand. But now, I mean, it's not like I love talking about it, but I know I'm mindful where it comes from. I'm aware that I'm thinking negatively of it, and that's stupid. Right. So changes perspective. So I think it depends on the situation. And sometimes you don't always know. It's different. It's like a video game. I'm not going to be triggered, or I'm not going to be questioning my self-worth with something that happened in my 20s.
Right.
But, I continually improve and move up levels of the video game, and I get hit with new challenges, new ways to doubt myself. And it's interesting, I guess.
Yeah. But to your point, just being aware of it. And I love the example of your hand going up, because I think there is a very real physiological response that we can have in our bodies when we're having those thoughts. And so I think it is important to pay attention to them, whether it's,
there's times where I feel like I've been kicked in the gut and I'm like, what is that? Right. Or,
Right.
you feel the chest pressure, the tightness from, just thinking certain thoughts or, whatever that is for you, the tension headache, recognizing those signs and symptoms because the mind body are inextricably connected. And I think we sometimes forget about that.
Well, yes, I think we do often forget. And then sometimes we don't even, like Jamie talked about that, like, drinking and, basically anesthetizing herself from having to deal with stuff. And I don't like, there was a lot there, but I think you don't necessarily identify the reason, that you're anxious, or, that like you have that anxiety and it manifests in different ways and the causes might be different.
Absolutely. So. Great point. Talk to us a little bit about the false assumptions that come from society, gender roles, cultural backgrounds. How do you see that play into imposter syndrome?
For me, I do not like being bad at things. That's always just been but people expect because women have been the most of this. They expect, because of my age and what I look like, that, I'm going to be great with babies, right? That's the assumption that's made. And I've even had sister-in-laws that just, I don't want to say threw their baby at me because, people don't throw babies, but she just put the baby in my lap. And I was like, I stiffened, and of course the baby cried, but I was like, there was never this conversation about it. There was an assumption. And there's an assumption I put on myself too about, I freak out about makeup. That's where my insecurity and my self-doubt comes from, and my imposter syndrome. And I'm like, people are going to find out that I don't know what I'm talking about because of makeup. Like, there's this test to go up to a makeup counter or whatever. Like, and the fact I learned about that when I started going down this rabbit hole when my eyebrows started disappearing, right? Like, what to do, how to fix it. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I started this talk in my ear, or this negative self-talk or imposter syndrome about, all these other people I assumed would know all about their teenage years, how to deal with makeup. But you know what? That's not true. And that's not every woman. But again, like, yeah, I think those gender roles, even when we don't, like, I'm judgy and mean if a guy dyes their hair, right? Too black. Like, I think of Mighty Mouse, here he comes to save the day. And I mean, it works both ways, right? Like, there's, I'm
sure.
Why do I care? Rock it. If you feel better with dyeing your hair black like you're 20, then great, do that. But I mean, I think those roles and being judgy is, a man shouldn't, care about going gray, but a woman should know about makeup. And that's not always the case. I mean, it's amazing how like other people are second nature to them to apply makeup or, battle these problems. But I went on a total downward spiral because of, I think it was a makeup brush. Maybe a makeup brush on the heels of an eyelash curler. Like, I don't know what anything is. And it was like this, I am a materials expert. I have a master's in engineering. Instead of giving myself a pep talk about that, I was like totally talking to myself about how you should know this stuff. I should all over myself. So
yeah, the shoulds are powerful, and it's really important that we question them, right? Where are they coming from? Where do they stem from? Are they internal? Are they external? How long have we been carrying them? And I think you're right. We subscribe to these stereotypes, and it's, you can unsubscribe.
Yeah.
But you have to challenge it. You have to challenge the thinking and realize, and then help other people shift their thinking around you as well, which can be sometimes really challenging as well.
And so be mindful of who you're listening to. Don't take advice from somebody, or that you wouldn't ask for.
Yes.
Do you know what, but I seem, even with the people who leave 5 stars on Amazon, they'll say one thing and I'll be stuck on that one thing. Not the other positive stars, I'll be stuck on that one thing. And I'm not sure that that's not societal, or that's not the way I was raised, that, address all your flaws. And sometimes flaws are just flaws.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's a great point. I would love to know, Sheila, this is such great advice. What's one thing that you want our listeners to consider doing differently, or changing after listening to today's episode?
I think my big thing was just to realize you're not alone. Like everybody experiences this limiting belief of whether or not they, that they don't belong or they're not enough, or this self-doubt that I think is called imposter syndrome based off of who's diagnosing it and who they're diagnosing. And I think just knowing that there's power in that, knowing you're not alone, that, most people, if not everybody, has it at different times in their life.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think it's okay normalizing having the conversation too, right? With trusted people is important.
Yes.
For sure. And experts. Definitely helps. We talk a lot about, as you know, success, defining success and redefining success on this show. So I would love to know from your perspective, based on your history and your experience and where you are today, how do you define success and maybe how that's evolved over time for you?
How it's evolved over time, I think I defined success by the money you made when you were 18. But there's so much about me that I wouldn't agree with my 18-year-old self on.
Yeah.
But I define success in the moment like everybody else. Like I would think most people, you have a different meter and that changes. But I really like, this is a Rocky Balboa quote. And he's talking to Apollo Creed and he's like, it's not how hard you punch, it's how many punches you can take and keep moving. And that's how you win. And I think winning and success is, very mutual. It's just keep moving. And I think Ralph Waldo Emerson has a quote about success. And he's like, sometimes, like, it's a really long quote that I'm not going to, but he's talking about, it might be a redeemed social order. It might be a garden patch. And how you define it is huge. And I think you got success. Don't let it make yourself critical, and don't define by success by somebody else's terms, right? It's so easy for culture. Like my mom thinks differently about success than my niece, right? Like it's just different. But that doesn't mean either of those is my metric of success at the time. Probably my niece is not going to understand a garden patch being successfully home, although my mom probably would.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think and that comes back to also personal values, right? And what's important to you. And I love what you said about it's a very personalized and individual definition. And I think we all probably could sit with that and think about, how it applies to us more personally versus success generally. So I love that. Sheila, where can our listeners learn more about you, the work that you do, and purchase a copy of your book?
So the book is available at all the places, but I think Amazon is the easiest place. And the book comes in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. And I actually really like the audiobook is the way to read, absorb, whatever, this medium. But I have Is the Seat for Me is my book, and I have the website Is the Seat for Me, and just fill that out and you get a free copy of a chapter of the book, like ebook or a chapter of the audiobook if that's your jam. But if you do that, then you have to enter your name and your email. That's it. And you get that copy, and I'll email you back and forth and we'll start a conversation and I won't spam you.
Amazing. That sounds fantastic. Sheila, I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights, your expertise. This has been really insightful conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Gia. I really appreciate that. And it was an honor to be on this podcast. Thanks.
Appreciate it. And of course, you can visit my website at gialacqua.com, reach out on Instagram at gialacqua. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. This is Gia signing off with gratitude for your time and energy. Our mic drops, but the movement continues. Until next time, your next chapter is waiting. Take care.
That concludes another empowering episode of Your Future Starts Now. Before we wrap up, I want to thank this incredible community of high-achieving women. Your energy, resilience, and commitment to growth are the driving force behind what we do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower high-achieving women just like you. And of course, share Your Future Starts Now with the extraordinary women in your life who are also on a journey of healing and empowerment. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts, let us know what topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Stay connected on Instagram at Gia Lsits. I encourage you to carry the energy of this conversation into your day and keep on supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time, remember, your next chapter is waiting.